Okay, so we're back in our competition here in the competition dashboard. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into flight number 1. So we're here now on the flight dashboard for flight number 1, which is the Monday AM. So it's the Monday morning flight. And it's currently live. So what live means, it means that it's in progress. And when the pilots are flying, we're going to be capturing all of their balloon live data. On the left-hand side here, we have the navigation for the flight. So we have various tools that we can use for changing the flight status, editing the flight, as well as some calculators and things like that, and which we'll be looking at later on in this lesson and some other lessons. We have all the information then about the actual flight. So this is data that helps make up the task data sheet, as well as links to the weather file that's been uploaded. Then at the top here, we have the information about the tasks. So this has each of the tasks that have been set as part of the flight by the competition director. We then have all of the scoring information. So as the flight goes, or the tasks go through the various stages of scoring, whether it's measurements, provisional, official, and final, you'll get different icons showing what the status of that task is. And then you have a few other tools here, so you're able to come in and edit the task as well as start scoring it. Now, a little bit further down, we have a few other bits of information. So firstly, we have the information about the task data sheet. This is where you're able to come in and view the task data sheet. And also you can download the weather sheets as well. We then have a couple of widgets that show you just the status of firstly the flight report form. So we can see that 63% of the pilots have submitted them, as well as the balloon live tracks. Then the next section is where we process the flight data. And we're going to come back to this because this is the workflow that you're going to be working through as part of the scoring process. And then at the bottom, we have the pilot list. So this is all the pilots that are in the competition, and it shows us a whole lot of information. Firstly, it shows us the status of the flight report forms. So we can see, for example, Kim Wexler, hers has been reviewed and approved. Chris here, his is ready to be reviewed. Somebody has not submitted theirs, and then somebody has had theirs rejected. So this gives you a snapshot to the status, and you can click through to each of the flight report forms. We also can see the status of their balloon live track. So some have finished, some are still tracking, and then Michael Scott has not got a track at all. So obviously that would be something you'd want to investigate. Penalties will be populated once we've processed the flights and processed the penalties. So we'll come back to that. Markers will show you the status of the markers. So in the flight report forms, the pilots will be specifying if they dropped markers or not. If they've said they've dropped all their markers, it will flag it as a tick. If they have not dropped all their markers, it will show that some need returning. What you're able to do though is you can come in here, as people return their markers, you can click on that and change the status. So you can say, yes, this person has now returned all of their markers. The launch time and the landing time, they will be processed as part of the flight processing, and they will appear once we've done that, and we'll come back to that. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to go and change the status of the flight. So as I said before, the flight is currently live, but once the flight is finished, you want to then go and change the status. So on the website, it will show that the flight is complete. So let's go in here at the top left corner, you can see change flight status, and we have a number of different statuses. So I'll talk you through those. So draft is the state of when the director is creating the task data sheets and adding all the information about the flight and the tasks. When it's in draft, it cannot be seen on the public website. It's only going to be available in the competition center. Pending is a state that's not really used anymore. This is similar to live in that the flight data sheet, the task data sheet will be available on the website for the public. However, no balloon live data will be able to be captured. So we typically see that a director will go straight from draft to live and don't use the pending state. Complete, which we're about to change it to, is when the flight is finished and pilots have all landed. So you can flag the flight as complete and it will show on the public website that that flight has been finished. And then if you cancel the flight, you can choose cancelled, and that means that on the website, it will flag that flight has been cancelled. But what we're going to do is we're just going to change it to the complete status, and we can now see that it's flagged it as complete, and all the details and all the tasks have shown that it's been complete as well. All right, so the next thing we want to do is we want to go and update some of the flight information that's relevant for scoring. So what we do then is we're going to come into the Edit Flight button. And in the Edit Flight state, what we can see here is that we have all the information about the actual flight. And this is data that the director will have set up as part of creating the task data sheet. So we have the dates and the things like the QNH. Do not touch any of these. You don't want to change the QNH because it will affect the balloon live data that's been captured. We have all of the optional information for the task data sheet. So things like launch period, solo flight, etc. We have all the comments and notes. And then basically at the bottom of the page here, we have some of the things that you can change as a scorer. So here what you can see is that we're able to set up the actual launch period start time and end time. So for example, what we might find is that on the task data sheet, not in this case, but in some cases it might be that the director has said that it's the green flag plus 30 minutes is the launch period. What you're able to do is then actually go and set what the actual launch period ended up being. So for example, if the green flag went up at 7 a.m, you put 7 a.m. here, and then it might be 7:30 that it finished. But what we're going to do is we're going to use what the actual director put here. So launch period was, because it's a fly-in, was a 6:40, and then 7:20 that was when it finished. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 6:40 and 7:20. And that means that the scoring system can use those times for calculating any of the penalties. So for example, if they launched early or launched late. And then we're going to update the flight. All right, so that's now set up. The flight's ready for the scoring process. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is now go and process the data. So what happens is when the Balloon Live data comes in from the Balloon Live app, it comes in what's called an IGC format, which is a very raw format of data containing all of the things like the timestamp, the longitude and latitude, the altitude. All of that information is in a very raw state. So what we're doing is we're going to actually process that data so it becomes a much more friendly format that can be used by the scoring system. So it's simply a case of coming in here and clicking on that Process Flight button. Once you do that, it will go through each of the pilot's tracks and it will convert the data into that friendly format. Now this may take a couple of minutes, so once you click on it, just leave the screen open, let it run. Don't close the window while it's in mid-process because it may corrupt some of that data. But as it goes through the process, you'll see it comes to the end and then it will show you a link to take you back to that flight analysis page. All right, so now we can see that the flight has been processed. It gives you the date of last processing, and then it also shows it as green. Now, if later on we upload the track for that pilot, you can come in and reprocess the flight, or you can actually process the flight for just that individual pilot, which we can show you in a minute. So now that we have the flight processed, we can go and then process the penalties. So first we're going to go and process the PZs. So when we do this, what this does is it goes through each of the pilot's tracks and then looks at each of the PZs and sees if they've violated any of those PZs. When we come back to the site here, we can see that we actually have some PZ penalties and we can go and have a look at those shortly. So we'll come back to that. Then we're going to look at processing the actual penalties around the task. So this will look at things like launch period, launch location, scoring periods, and any of those sort of task-related things that we can process from the Balloon Live data. So I'm just going to click on that. This runs very quickly. And then we can come back in here and see that we now have a lot more penalties are being applied. Okay, now that we have finished processing the flight and processing the penalties, we can see that the pilot list at the bottom has a lot more information. We can see that all the pilots that have been flagged as having some sort of penalty. We can also see the launch times and landing times that have been calculated for each pilot that we have tracks for. But what we can do is we can dive in and have a look at much more information about each of these pilots. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Liz Lemon's name, and this will take me into the flight analysis page for Liz. It gives us all that information about the launch and landing times. You can link off to their Balloon Live track data, view their flight report form. But then we have a whole lot of other information here. Firstly, we can see that she has been given a PZ violation penalty. So this is recommending that you apply a penalty of 250 competition points because she landed in a yellow PZ. So we can click on the map here. We can actually see exactly what she's done. This is her landing point. It looks like she's moved her balloon after she's landed, but she has landed in this PZ. So that's definitely something that we want to look at applying to Liz's scores. Further down, we can see that we have a graph here that shows her flight profile and all of the different things that have occurred. You can zoom in here and it just gives you a bit of a timeline of exactly what has occurred. So we can see where she's connected her logger, she's declared 2 goals. This is her calculated launch point, and we can start seeing everything around when she's dropped her markers, as well as where that landing has occurred at the end here. Below we have that map that shows you everything from her launch point to where she's dropped her marker, as well as the targets. They're all visible here as well, and all of her declarations, etc., are all shown on that map. So this just gives you more of a view of what's been going on with Liz's flight. If any data changes, so for example, you upload a new track file, which we'll show you in another lesson, you can actually reprocess the flight just for Liz, as well as reprocess her PZs and penalties using these links. So you have that flexibility just to process one pilot, not to do them all like we did previously. Okay, so that is all the information around flight management for scorers. The directors might do a few extra things, including creating the flights and the tasks, but for now, we're just looking at what you're going to be using as a scorer.